Okay, I'm going to do a demo of the first exercise that I would recommend to anyone who is starting out sculpting digitally. We're using Sculptris. Sculptris is a free download. It's been around for 10 years. I still use it pretty much every day and have for the last 10 years. I think it's an amazing tool. Let's start out, when you open Sculptris, you download it, from Pixelogic. Just search Sculptris free download, you'll find it. I don't think it's for Mac. I think it's only for PC these days. First thing you start out with is a sphere. And the grab tool might be the first tool that you use. There's two modes for most of the tools. Grab global will move the whole sphere up and down, or whatever direction you want. It moves the whole sphere. If you take away the global part, you have a tool, and the size of it, it shows up as a circle. The size of it, you go to size, you could dial in the size of the tool. The strength right here, I usually keep it somewhere in the middle. It depends on what tool. With grab, it doesn't really matter too much. Let's see. You can Control Z, go backwards to do a step back. I'm gonna look for the front of this. It's the top. Okay. All right. There. When you just press Z, you'll lock in the axis. So let's get started with the tool. So you can see the grab tool pulls in whatever direction you need. I'm just what I'd recommend is you just explore it. Don't try to make anything at first. Just mess around to get to know the tools. So that's what grab does right there. Let's go to draw. Draw is another popular tool that people will use. Let's dial this up a little bit, maybe a little more size. So you can just kind of mess around with draw like that. You can see how it just raises, kind of draws in some form. Now there's a tool, something called invert. So for the positive version of draw, it gives you a convex form. Invert will do the opposite, so it'll give us a concave form. You can see it makes a concave mark. And you can, like I say, you can control the size of it, also the strength. You could have it be a little bit more subtle if you want. The next is the flat tool. Flat, usually the strength has to be dialed up a little bit to get it to work the way you usually want it to. And you can see it does kind of flatten. You can move it over a whole surface. Something like that. Now if you go to invert flat, it'll project the tool, it looks like it's doing both things. Quite frankly, I never used the inverted version of flat, but you can see what it is doing. Now, what it did was it kind of got the mesh to kind of bunch in on itself. That's not really something you want. Usually you go to the smooth tool. I have the smooth tool down on low. Because if you have it up high, which I'll show you, it washes everything away really quickly. So if you go to the strength and the smooth tool real high, it'll just erase really quick. And usually you don't want that. You just want to keep what you have, but to kind of tighten up the mesh basically. All right, so we've got the flat. Let's go to inflate. Inflate, usually you have to have it dialed up a little bit to see what it can do. You can see it just kind of, it actually does inflate it. What it's done is the mesh is folding in on itself again, and you try not to have that happen. It gets out of control. So I'll smooth it down to fix the mesh. But quite frankly, since this is your first one, I wouldn't worry about it too much. It's just that when you let it do this, it's hard to continue working on a piece. You really kind of can't keep working on it. You kind of got to start over. So, and that's okay. You can start over as many times as you want. My recommendation is that you spend a solid evening working with it, or a day, and just really kind of experiment with it. And you should be amazed at what you'll be able to do with it, really. When I started using it, I think the way I really got into it was I saw my kids were able, I had them test it out first when they were little. And they did some pretty cool things with it, so I was like, well, let me try this out now. And so for the first week, I just kind of experimented with it like this. Made like creatures and kind of got used to what you could do with the tools. And then I started specifically saying, oh, okay, well, I want to sculpt this. And it's pretty easy to do. So I'm not going to waste a lot of time just showing you how to smooth out the, sometimes it takes a lot of time to do that. You could go to Invert Inflate, which would be deflate, right? So let's find out, wait, I've got to smooth. So it's on deflate because it's on the invert. And then and then you still have the problem we just had. But again, I would smooth it out to get rid of all that weird stuff. And you can tell the surface doesn't look normal. So that's, I'm not going to bog you down with that too much. Details are important. Okay, triangle count right here, the lower left, is important. Usually you can work with a couple 100,000 triangles reasonably. This program doesn't do too well with a million or more. It'll do 2 million triangles, but it works very slow at that. So you try to keep it down in the 200,000 or less range. The way to do that is make sure your detail is in the middle. If your detail's too low, it'll fight you. It doesn't really want to, it takes a while for you to get what you're looking for because it's not giving you triangles. You can see right here, triangles are what it's used when it gives you increases triangles, it's increasing the detail. Now if you have the detail too high up, it'll give you a lot of triangles, and that might be good for the piece. It might look good, but what happens is it just jacks up the triangles really quickly, and you don't want that. You want to have it in the middle. It gives you what you need. It keeps the triangle count down. So let's go to pinch. Pinch is interesting. If you have something that's too wide a characteristic, you can take the pinch tool and it'll bring it together. Kind of works, you know, for certain things. If you want to make it wider, you do the invert. So sometimes it's good just in small doses in a way. We can do crease tool. Crease tool I use quite a bit for certain things. So you have the original crease. You can make this crease. So I guess you'd think that you might make wrinkles with it or something like that. If you do the invert crease, this is interesting. It'll give you a peak. So let's see. Usually you use the crease, the regular crease for between the lips, and then the invert crease for, say, the top of the lips. Usually, since it works in symmetrical, it automatically gives you things that you can see a face in. You don't have to try too hard for that. This was all just random. I'm not really have any preconceived idea of what I'm trying to make. All right. So Control A. First of all, let's add it. Let's add a couple things to it. You could add object, and since it's in symmetrical mode, we're adding two. So I want these to be scaled down. So we go to the scale tool, and we want global and XYZ, and we just kind of scale it down with the mouse. Got the grab tool on so I can place those spheres. Maybe make those a little bit smaller. Now, if we just did XYZ for scale, let's click onto this. We can pick out an area that we want to change the scale of, like say the ends of that. Or invert, actually I don't know what it does. If you scroll, if you push your mouse up, let's take the invert off, sorry. Pull it down, it gets smaller. Push it up, it gets bigger. Control Z, you can reduce steps, undo steps with Control Z. Now if you have just global on, you could change kind of the proportion. Like it'll scale up in a single direction, let's say, like that. So you can mess around with scale and have some fun with that. So right here, say we want to reduce, we got a high triangle count here. We could go to the reduce brush, and you could just kind of reduce. You can see it's reducing the triangles right there. Now if you wanted to add triangles, you invert, and you can add triangles. Or you could go to this, reduce the whole thing that's selected. It'll uniformly reduce triangles all over the sculpture right here. Now if we wanted to add a lot of triangles, this will quadruple the amount of triangles. We could press that, and you can see that it's added a lot of triangles. It's put us up at 500,000 triangles. That's not a big deal. You could go back to the reduce selected, and it'll drop it back. So we're going to turn the wireframe off. And right now I think that's the first demo.